Welcome everyone. Today's a day for the Super Q&A. If you're unsure what this is, I am funded and capable to do what I do through Patreon, which is incredibly important. And as a reward, and also a little reminder every now and then for the main channel that it exists, I decided to kick up a questions and answers show that people over there get to ask me things and they're almost guaranteed to get a response. The videos, therefore, tend to go on quite long, hence the word super, and there you have it. If you guys are at all interested, please do consider hitting the link at the top of the description and checking out my page over there. It is exactly how I live my life, and obviously this year has been a disaster. The past 3 months have really negatively affected this platform, and while you may sit there smugly thinking, well, that's your own fault, you're probably right, but I got no choice now but to kind of claw my way back. So hopefully there'll be something fun to talk about in this video. There'll be lots of Guild Wars 2 stuff, lots of other game stuff, General's live stuff. Let's jump on in, and I'll try to pace myself. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but whenever I do a video like this, I give way too long responses for like the first 3 guys, and then everyone else gets a much shorter one. So let's try and find a middle ground here. Lemast says, New World is currently open for a playable preview. Have you had the chance to try it? And if so, what are your thoughts? My thoughts about New World so far, first of all, I haven't played either of like the preview, alpha, beta periods, but I do have a friend that's been playing them. I've been watching some streams. My opinions about New World are very much similar to my opinions about BDO, in that it seems to be doing some things really well. I definitely do like the look of the combat, but it also does stuff really soullessly and really horrendously. I think whenever these new big ticket MMOs come out, it just really drives home to me how desperate MMO fans are for a good product. They'll look over so much horrendous stuff just to try and get that MMO itch scratched somehow. I don't know how successful the game will be. Obviously, I had bigger ambitions for it before. I made some of the first big YouTube videos about New World altogether, and I kind of wanted to keep that going. But now, it's like this big bandwagon thing, and I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I have a real problem with bandwagons and feeling like a lemming and feeling like I'm following a crowd, and I don't want to be a part of your crowd. I want to do something unique and special and different. I'm a snowflake, damn it. So now that everyone's doing New World, I kind of think, screw all those guys. I'm better than that. I'll do something else. And it's kind of turned me off, at least from a YouTube perspective. As far as playing the game, I'm sure if a bunch of friends personally end up playing it, I'll jump in. And it can be worthwhile to play other MMOs for sure. I'm a fan of the genre, but I don't know really what I think more deeply than that just yet, because I've been a little bit arm's length with it. Next, we have a question from Tirza, who says, what game, or games, if you can choose just one, would you wish you could wipe your memory of and play through it again for the first time, and why? So I've kind of got lots of answers to this, almost a little bit of a cop-out, but here's the thing, I'm a big RPG guy. I really like playing games with robust character mechanics and interactions and buildcraft and all that kind of stuff. And so my immediate temptation, if I were to think of my favorite games or the games I've spent most time on in my life, my instinct might be to go for one of those. But the thing is, games like that, probably I end up sinking so many hours in and really end up loving because they're really replayable and they don't diminish too much over time. Meanwhile, there are other games that I really, really love, but you just have the one experience and it kind of feels a bit pointless going back through. Games with good mysteries where really the story is the main point, you know, I'm not going to go back and play those. Or games that try to give you a nice emotional experience, like looking at my Steam library here in the top near the B section, I see Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. I love the game Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons, but I'd never play it again. So maybe a game like that is better to wipe your memory. Or like puzzly games. I was for a long time a big fan of point and click kind of adventure games. Probably my favorite of the whole genre is Machinarium from what, like 2009 or something? It's a pretty old game at this point. But on the odd occasion that I've genuinely tried to do a replay of that game, I kind of just get burned by it and bored because I know where to go and what to do. And so much of that game was the atmosphere that you absorb while being lost and trying to figure things out. So I think a game like that would be really good. Finally, and I think my real answer here is going to sound kind of lame, but I think my real answer is a similar thing, but horror games. So I remember when I kind of started with YouTube, Minecraft Let's Plays and stuff were blowing up, but so were horror LPs. I don't know whether that's such an in vogue thing now. I think finally all the people got used to the fact most content creators completely fake their reactions and it's all overblown. Maybe it is still a big thing, but I have to say, when that first wave came in, one of the big games was Frictional's Amnesia. And they had done a couple of games before that as well, Penumbra. And I remember getting, there were like 3 Penumbra games, or there were 2 and then an expansion or something, if I remember rightly. And I remember being really into those. There's something about a good horror movie or a good horror experience. Like if you go to a theme park and you do one of these like walk-through horror experiences, the more people that are into it and scared along with you and like talk about it with reverence, the more powerful it is, you know? And so I got really caught up in that back in the day with Amnesia, and I adored my first playthrough of it. It was really adrenaline-filled and super scary, but now it's way too familiar to me. I know how safe you are at certain places. I know how the patterns of the game works, and it's just not playable. So maybe I'd go with that just because that was such a profound experience for me. And I know it kind of spiked in popularity. People don't talk about that anymore. I don't even know what Frictional is doing anymore. But yeah, that was great. And a big shout out as well, of course, to the other game that Frictional did a bit later, Soma, which had all these amazing themes and interesting story beats, which I think you can carry out of the game, so I probably wouldn't wipe that one. My answers probably contained a surprising lack of nostalgia stuff. I reckon most people, when they answer this, would just think of their favorite nostalgia bomb game ever and want to replay it. But I don't know whether I really have a great candidate for that. I cherish all my memories of those and playing them when I was younger, and I reckon I wouldn't enjoy them so much if I wiped it and played it now as an adult. I'd probably not like the games at all. Next, we have a question I occasionally get. I'll probably give you a different answer this time, from Bretzel, who says, "Hey WP, glad to have you back. If you could live in any fantasy world, be it Guild Wars, Pokemon, Star Wars, etc., etc., what would you live in and why?" So here's the thing with this question. Again, you might be tempted to just say your favorite fantasy game or world that you've played before that you were kind of captivated by. But you got to think, if you're living in that world, there are dangers. And if you're living in that world, you're not necessarily a part of the adventuring band that goes and saves the world from the evil and discovers all the great mysteries. You're more probably going to be the guy that is being oppressed by the great evil or gets destroyed at the start of the second act or whatever and gets thrown away. So you have to be careful. And so you say of Guild Wars, Pokemon, Star Wars, I think Pokemon is probably the one that I would like the most there. They have all the conveniences of modern life, but also the magic. And also there's kind of a sense in the Pokemon world that no matter how old you are or what you're doing with your life, even if you're really young, it's kind of this socially acceptable and possible thing to just go out on an adventure that could last even years. You know, and these people aren't burdened by the reality of money and all this stuff, and you can find companions as you go. There's a very kind of liberating kind of sense to the Pokemon world where you get all the lovely stuff and you get the sense of adventure, and it all feels very safe, and there's kid gloves everywhere. So yeah, do seriously consider Pokemon if you're answering this question, guys. You might disregard it because it's a bit too kiddie or whatever, but that's exactly what makes it good. You mentioned Star Wars there as well. I'm not going to steal that one. I'm not actually a very big fan of Star Wars, and to tell you the truth, I'm not very familiar with the setting. I know that to get really into it, you've got to go into the extended universe, and some of that was invalidated with the new sequel movies and all that stuff. Not too interested in that, but along the lines of sci-fi, that's pretty rich as well. Anything super sci-fi where people have great technology. So I'm going to go with Star Trek because I am a big Trek nerd. And I mean, Christ, if you got to live on Earth in the Star Trek universe, and then Christ, you're basically on a utopia with all this potential and incredible stuff at your fingertips. Who wouldn't want that? Always a good choice. Unless, like, it's the middle of the Dominion War or something. But still, it's a good choice. So Jomo has a question, says, have you ever thought about what the Guild Wars IP would look like in some other genres? A card game, a first-person shooter, or an RTS? ArenaNet's only ever done Guild Wars as an online RPG, similar to how Riot has only done the MOBA League of Legends. Now Riot's experimented with taking the world of LoL outside of the MOBA, and it got me thinking if ArenaNet did that with the world of Guild Wars, what kind of games would come out of it? Yeah, League's a really, really good example of this because they are so successful and they've just been building this world and this like whole IP, even though most of people are just there on Summoner's Rift all the time, or occasionally like an event map or something. They now have this huge body of lore and world building and locations and, you know, multiple champions hailing from the same area of the world that intersect at various times that they can do a ton with. I think that, yeah, in many ways, the Guild Wars series and what ArenaNet made is very similar. And actually, I dedicated a whole video to brainstorming on this topic back when the layoffs happened. When the layoffs occurred and we heard that there were these other projects the studio had been working on that fell away. I kind of did some speculation and some community discussion about the kind of things that might have inspired them, the kind of things that I thought this user base would actually enjoy. And yeah, I mentioned an RCS there. I've obviously been thinking a bit about tabletop and card game stuff. We did the whole Guild Wars 1 drafting series just this year. I think the easy answer most people go with here, so they don't have to think much deeper, is the single player concept, because a lot of what Living World is feels like it's just working as a single player game, and ArenaNet would have more space in a single player environment. The question is, how does that make the studio money if it's not like this lifestyle experience that people keep coming back to all the time? Can they release games that are just chapters that are allowed to be closed? And all that kind of stuff. But yeah, single player RPG, and then expanding from there, I could totally see. And RTS is actually probably the top of the pile for me. I would love to see some Guild Wars RTS. Get a sense of some of these events in lore, like moments during the Guild Wars or various conflicts, like the Crichtons defending the Char, but in a game and in an engine that really gives you this epic sense of scale. I think that would be amazing. And while I've never covered any RTS games on my channel, I am a bit of an RTS fan. Well, I was years and years and years ago. So I'd totally buy that. Einar Norbeck says, since none of us can travel freely anymore, where have you been thinking about traveling to if you've had the urge at all? Nowhere. Whether there was a plague or not, I would not be traveling. I don't earn enough money to travel. I haven't been on holiday for like 8 years. If it was a serious possibility, I'd like to go, you know, do the sightseeing thing around mainland Europe, get a little bit of history, get a little bit of culture, and then, you know, spend other holidays doing the boring, sitting around at a pool or at the beach hotel stuff. That'd be nice, and hell, even if it did happen, it would be kind of amazing to share sides of that with you guys on YouTube. I'd love to explore that whole side of the world, even if it's, you know, not very creative. A lot of people do that kind of thing. But so far, it really doesn't look like it's going to happen to me in my 20s at least. Also, question 2 is, what is really stopping you from getting involved in World vs. World? So yeah, in so many videos, I say, oh, this could actually be good. This might bring me to World vs. World, but I never make any serious attempt to. I'll tell you what the barrier is. It's a similar barrier to why I don't really raid anymore. It's having to communicate with people. It's having to find a community. And particularly for me, I have this added side of it where I kind of just want to be a complete nobody that no one cares about. But when I join Discord channels, people kind of say, oh, is that wooden potatoes? And I don't like the conversation becoming about me or too focused on me or anything like that. So I just kind of wither away. I guess one day it will be a thing. And in particular, I've always liked the idea of taking Spud into World vs. World. But that's a matter of waiting for alliances, which, like the Legendary Armory, we don't have any news on when it's coming, just that it exists. I've always said that, and I have had periods where I've got into World vs. World. I talk about it as though I never play World vs. World. And it kind of irritates me because it's very, very, very likely I've played way more World vs. World than most people listening to my videos. But nonetheless, I'm not super dedicated to it. And I would say, I've always maintained this, I think World vs. World looks really good for like a top end. If you're really into it, I think it's amazing. I think where World vs. World is bad is that transitionary moment, which is where I am. Freddick says, have you played any other good video games lately that you want to tell us about? I have been playing other games a little bit. We mentioned League a second there. I was kind of into League for a little bit late last year, and then also for a small window this year. I think I was playing a lot of Teemo at that time. But the main game that I've been playing that I really haven't talked to you guys about at all in the evenings has been Ark Survival Evolved, amazingly. And I'm sure that is not a game you guys would associate with me whatsoever. But Ark is like a terrible game in so many ways, and a really rough around the edges game in so many ways. But if you can kind of push through it, there's a moment where it sort of clicks, and it's been pretty fun. And the main reason I've been playing that is because that's what a lot of friends online have been interested in playing. So that's been kind of the co-op project for a while. I think we're just now kind of leaving it. But at one point I was so into it, I was like, oh, I could totally do a series on this. Just to be clear, I have no plans to do a series on it. But yeah, it's kind of captivating in certain ways. I like exploring around, finding all the extra bits of lore and information. I could see some formats that would work. Another game I've really got an itch to play at the moment, mostly because I watched Magical Mike's speedrun of it, is Halo. The MCC is obviously out on PC now. I think Halo 3 is fully on there. And I told myself when the MCC came to PC I'd play it, but I haven't got around to it. So that might kill some free hours off on the side in the coming months, if I get to it. Okay, this next question might be really unprofessional and embarrassing to air in a way, so I'll keep it short. Sean Collins says, asked previously, but don't remember hearing an answer. Correct me if I'm wrong. Now, I think I answered this. I just haven't gone back and listened to the old video. So I'll do it really quickly. If you had a tattoo related to the Guild Wars franchise, what would it be and where? You've been planning and designing a Guild Wars related tattoo for your shoulder, but keep thinking more and more of things that could be included. The Eternal Alchemy, Dragons, Gods, Gwen, even the mysterious serpent painting in Ascalon. My latest idea is something dealing with the music notes of the Tyrion Overture song. Alternatively, if you're against tattoos, let me know and I'll stop asking. No, I'm not against tattoos. I don't have any tattoos. I feel like getting a tattoo for me, I put whatever it would have to be on such a high bar, such a high pedestal. I have no great inspiration for it. But I have actually fancied an idea of a Guild Wars related tattoo. A tattoo in kind of an unremarkable place that I don't really tell people about, but it would be kind of a personal thing maybe. And I'd like to do it at a moment in my life where I feel like I've really overcome something or done something great. A moment where I'm like really proud of myself and there's this big moment. At that time, I think it might be cool to get a Guild Wars related tattoo, which is the Ascension Symbols. So in Guild Wars 1, you have these 3 particular marks, one representing each of the campaign missions in the Crystal Desert. And you need to do all of these to ascend, but there's a symbol for each, and the 3 together mean Ascension. And it's obscure even by Guild Wars' standards, so no one's going to look at it and recognize it. So it's not going to be like cheesy or tacky, but it would have that personal meaning, you know. So I've always liked that, the idea of the Ascension Symbols together somewhere. There is also, to complicate things a little bit, in one of the assets in Guild Wars 1, there is a 4th Ascension symbol, and 5th, I think, that is not related to any mission that was ever implemented, but it's there. So there's like this weird enigmatic extra symbol that I don't know whether I'd include it in the tattoo or not. But these symbols, hell, I'll edit them on screen so you guys can see them. They're very kind of simple, you know, they're not too complicated. They're not going to like lose detail over time as your skin stretches or it fades and stuff like that. I think they look good and elegant. So yeah, that's what I've always privately felt. Matthias asks a question that I don't have a good answer for, but it's a super Q&A. I know you follow Paradox. What do you think of the release of Crusader Kings 3? I personally like how the franchise has evolved into an RPG rather than a classical map painter. So I do follow Paradox, but only really for Stellaris. That I haven't really bridged that gap. Oh, and I guess Magicka, right? Way back when. I'm not an active player of Magicka, but I also played that. So I'm not really familiar with Crusader Kings or any of their other real products. I do know that Martin Underwood, who was the game director for a long time on Stellaris, he was a fan of Crusader Kings 1, made a mod of Crusader Kings 2, and then got hired based off of that. So I saw him tweeting about it, but beyond that, I really don't know. I'm sorry, I can't give you more information. And a similar question here from Marco Vujevic, who says, have you ever played Ultimate Underworld 1 or 2, or the old one, just not the useless remake? Would you consider making a video series about it? I still have very fond memories about those games. So, as far as I know what you're talking about an Ultimate game that came out like right around near when I was born, to be honest. This game is almost as old as me. And the answer is no, I didn't. I do remember my dad owned it. I remember seeing the box on the shelf, but I can't remember ever watching him play. I don't think I ever played. I actually regret not knowing more about Ultima, just because where I am chronicling the Elder Scrolls around the time of Arena, it's a well-known fact that Arena was really inspired by the Ultima franchise, and the Ultima franchise was really big, right, and was doing really well, and they look like those kinds of classic first-person RPGs of which I've enjoyed a lot of in the past, but I sort of don't know what their granddaddy is, and that's Ultima, so I kind of wish I knew more, but not enough for me to actually sit down and play it. Are you giving me a recommendation for the franchise here all the way at 2020? It does count for something, though. Next, we have a question from David Mason, who says, do you still have your fish tank? Can we get a fish update? All right, so this is extremely embarrassing. It really says something about the way I have treated my life the past year that this is a fact about me. But here goes. When I most recently moved, a bit back now, all my fish got unhealthy. And I think it's because of the water where I live now. I think it's very hard water, and they're struggling to survive. They want it to be softer. I don't have any kind of filter, and if I used a filter, I think it would take ages to filter the water through. I don't own this place. You know, I certainly don't have a mortgage or anything like that, so I can't, get in there and rectify that in a big way. My only other choice would be to buy, water that conditioned, fresh water from outside, but obviously that's going to get really expensive and lacks some minerals, I think, as well, so isn't ideal. So basically my water isn't that good at this property, and all my fish got sick and eventually died. So they all died off. However, I've always liked the idea of replacing them and sitting down one day and doing some good research on something that will thrive in a tropical, freshwater tank, but it's kind of hard water, right? I like that idea, and then I could run it. However, I also am thinking maybe I might be moving again at some point. I don't know when, and in indeterminate time. It basically depends on whether I can get more money and make this career work. And I'm wondering if the reason they kind of all died and struggled was the stress of the previous move. So what has that led me to do? You're asking, do I still have a fish tank? I do. I have had a fish tank that I have ran. I've kept the filter going through it. I've blown bubbled air into it for a year, and it's had no fish in it for a year. I mean, I haven't turned the lights on and stuff like that, but I have maintained it just on the off chance that I will end up replacing a fish. I think in all reality, once I stop recording this video, I should empty it out. It's a big tank though, and it's kind of annoying to empty out. It's better to just keep running once you've got the balance, and you'd have to prime it and sort all the stuff out if you're going to go completely back for a full reset. So yeah, I've just kind of let it run, and I've let the filter keep going. Even though there's absolutely no living creature in it, I get a lot of funny looks from people that visit. And that's been the fish tank's life for over a year now. In fact, I think some of the last fish died right around, oh god, I think it was when the Mystic Forge raid came out. So a long time ago now. No, that's probably a bit too early. But there you go, that's what's going on with my tank. Irindil says, hey WP, my question, if you don't mind answering it, but of course you don't have to, what is the most important thing you learned about life or handling mentally challenging times during your hiatus that you would like to share with your audience? Bonus question, what is my favorite food IRL? I don't know what my favorite food IRL is, but I would say something that stands out I discovered recently is a pretzel place that does this crazy thing where they cook a pretzel around a hot dog and like stuff cheese in there and give you like tomato salsa with it, which I had one the other day. It kind of blew my mind, so let's go with that. As for things I've learned about handling mentally challenging times, I really can't say that I have learned anything. Not yet. I mean, it's too early to tell. I mean, I have techniques and ideas to keep myself productive, but whether they're effective enough long-term to go online and suggest to people, I couldn't. The thing with me is I don't feel like I've conquered anything or succeeded in anything unless I've managed to do it on the regular for like a long period of time. And maybe my bar that I'm setting is too high for myself, but that just makes me feel, I just don't really have much confidence that I've solved any problems or have any advice really to give people. The way I kind of look at it though is I don't really believe in a big click aha moment. I think that there may be 100 little things that impact you as a person day to day. And if today you can just like maybe find some kind of solution for one of them, cool. And just over the next several years, maybe try to limit that list. Just bring it down, bring it down, bring it down in just like these tiny little incremental steps. You have to learn to be happy with incremental victories instead of just hoping for a big one. That's a hard thing for me to wrestle with because I'm a really all or nothing person. And it sucks that a lot of things in life, you just have to take the pace slow. And yeah, I struggle with that. Kevin Carlin says, what improvements would you add to underwater combat in Guild Wars 2? I've always had, I think, a really solid answer to this. I'm amazed that ArenaNet hasn't done it because I'm such a genius. How could they possibly stand against it? And the idea is an underwater specialization, like a fourth specialization that you can have and is always active. Now, that fourth specialization doesn't compete with any others. It's like an elite spec. It's just there. But what you get to do is choose the rungs, right? So you've got the minor tier, you've got the major tier. You've got the minor, the master, and the grandmaster. Sorry, adept, master, and grandmaster. And at each of these, you've got 3 choices. And depending on which one you pick, it will actually have an impact on how your utilities work underwater, how your weapon skills work underwater, and so on. Because I really do think the biggest problem with underwater combat is that there's no meaningful build craft that hooks into it. And a specialization would hopefully work towards that. Maybe, I mean, in open world, you can just swap specialization choices all the time. And I get that not every player does that, but some people do. So there are some rough bits around it, but I think that would be something nice. The other thing as well is just going to be too much work for ArenaNet. But actually, I don't believe there's too much of a balance problem underwater. I think there's a noise problem. All the animations underwater need to be culled the hell back down. Like way down. so that people can actually see what's going on, so that you can actually have bosses with meaningful telegraphs instead of fighting like jellyfish and sharks that are clipping into walls, and then someone uses a sync ability and the entire animation resets and it suddenly flips 180 degrees and shifts like 30 feet to the left as it slowly sinks, and then it snaps back to the original position, all while an electric light show is going on. Like, that's nonsense. It's how readable the combat is underwater that is a big problem. And buildcraft. Those are the two things. I actually think the rest of it's really robust and really well done. It doesn't get enough credit. And in fact, I've got some videos coming up later this month where you'll hear me go on a similar rant. People with Drive access on Patreon can obviously just go see that now already, but I'll keep it a secret for now. Grant says, hey WP, just a few questions about the Elder Scrolls series. What's been the biggest challenge in making the arena playthrough so far? Have there been any major surprises for you while creating it? If you're up for sharing, what's the most exciting thing about the next game for you? Well, the most challenging thing about arena has definitely been all of the off-screen scrambling around to keep upgrading the tiers of gear. My original vision for that series was that you would see every tier of armor and weapon, and we'd get, you know, all the different colorations and skins and graphics and things as we went through. I wanted to do it fully comprehensive, but it is so tedious. Clicking the world map, because everything's slow and clunky, waiting for it to load, clicking a province, finding the town, making sure that you've researched what town sells what on the wiki, which is a whole other process, going there, asking for directions to the shop, getting a little bit closer, asking for directions to the shop, getting a little bit closer, asking for directions to the shop, getting inside, trying to buy the thing, haggle for the thing, and well done, you got your left pauldron. Now you've got to do it all again for the right pauldron, and now we're going to go, there's just so much to do there. That you'll notice, I think in today's episode, or maybe tomorrow's, yesterday's, sometime around now, I'm just going to jump to the final tier. We're going to be in ebony armor, and that kind of helped it out a lot as well. But I've also noticed that as far as videos that people want to watch, I kind of really hate that game. I like playing it and I like showing it to people, but where it's so dungeon oriented and yet there is no dungeon minimap, there's no real great sense of navigation for the viewer. Obviously, I've played it, so I'm only guessing at how the viewer feels, but, you know, when you're on YouTube, you spend a lot of time thinking about how people consume what you make, trying to get it as good as possible, or at least I try to. And I can imagine that people get a bit turned off of watching it, because you're just kind of seeing a guy run around rooms looking at walls a lot, and there's no real good sense of where you're navigating to. And I think that that's been a real problem. That's caused me a lot of anxiety this year with that series, and kind of ended up causing me to look away from it for a while because I just didn't know how to resolve it. In the later episodes, I've started doing a thing where I mark on the map the general direction I'm trying to go. I'll like type, is it over here, ? And hopefully that helps people. And I try in the commentary to say I'm going generally northwest, I'm going generally southeast or whatever. I don't know, maybe I'm being too critical of it, but I feel like that's a real challenge with making a really fun arena series. There's also just the simple fact that that game is first and foremost like an almost random big open world sandbox, and to play it linearly, to just get through the story, so to speak, kind of doesn't work in some ways. Kind of doesn't respect the design of the game and the emergent stuff that could happen with the design of the game, and save scumming breaks and all this kind of stuff. So anyway, I think it's been amazing, and I'm really happy to have gone back and got really to grips with it. I hope I've imparted a lot of great knowledge to people. There's only a few episodes left of it as well, so if anyone has put off watching it so far, obviously that series is a big thing for me this year. I really want to make something of myself that's not just Guild Wars, and I want to go for the Elder Scrolls, so this is the start of it all. And if you've skipped out on it, now's a great time to come back, because all the videos are done and there's only a couple of episodes left, so you will have a complete series to watch. But yeah, what's exciting for the next game? Daggerfall is just like a more polished, upgraded version of Arena, so hopefully it fixes some of the things I just mentioned. That's what would be exciting about to me. But that is the one game that I haven't played ever going into this. I've done multiple Arena playthroughs in recent years. I played Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, all that stuff. I won't rehash what I did in the other video. Next question. Will Hawkins says, do you think that daily achievements should include Icebrood Saga content in the rotation? Absolutely, I do. I'm actually a big advocate for ArenaNet looking at the daily system again. Now, usually I don't advise ArenaNet or talk about things that they've already done a million times. You know, like people say, oh, they should destroy Lion Arch. Well, hold on, they already did that. So no, I'm not going to ask ArenaNet to do that. That, to me, is not a good move for the MMO. Stop going in circles. Usually that is how I feel. However, with the daily system, it is true they've done lots of revamps over the years. They put a lot of work into it over the years and just improving the achievement infrastructure and so on. Even with all of that in mind, and even with my predisposition to tell them, okay, leave it alone now, stop reinventing the wheel, let's move forward. Even with all of that, I really think they should look at the daily and the monthly system again, and maybe even weekly. I think that could be a very big bang for their buck update with Guild Wars, in terms of creating some kind of really good currency or incentive or drive for people to do those, and it genuinely changes every week. I like the idea of weeklies, where it's like, okay, this week we are all super into Lake Doric, and there's a huge population of Lake Doric, and then maybe next week it's a Season 4 map, and maybe the week after that it's Icebreed Saga. I think there's a lot of power in that, in bringing new life to all those old areas of the game, keeping the game experience for active players really varied. That's the thing. You want it to be as varied as possible. You don't want these guys sitting about doing nothing but raids or doing nothing but fractals. That is not healthy for the game long term. People need to keep like this broad perspective so that their opinions don't become wildly wonky, which frankly most people's opinions are. So yeah, I think the daily system could be brilliant, but it would require, you know, especially on the incentive end, some proper reworks. And yeah, I like the weekly idea more than the daily idea, frankly. But there you have it. Thalandor asks, what's your favorite Elder Scrolls game and or part of a game? So my favorite is, while I've played Morrowind a good amount and I've played Skyrim a good amount, I've played Oblivion more than them both, probably put together. I have the most nostalgia for Oblivion, so I'm going to say that one is my favorite at this point. Who knows, if and when we get to the spin-offs and stuff, maybe there's something else I'll fall in love with. Arena certainly never dethroned it. It's just a little bit too old. And so, favorite part of an Elder Scrolls game. Now, I find that really hard to answer because I consume those products as like quite broad experiences. Like what I'm enjoying while I'm in Elder Scrolls is like the sense of freedom of exploration and immersion. And am I less immersed or more immersed at the Waynan Priory versus being at, you know, the smoldering ruins of Kvatch or Bravil or something? I don't think so. I think I'm enjoying it all I'm vibing in the same kind of way with the whole thing. And if I end up getting attached to something or having a favorite moment, it's because my mage during that playthrough had a cool moment with the spell that I was casting there, and I got through a challenge in an interesting way. So it's not really, you know, something that the devs pre-packaged for me. It's something that emergently came out of it being a decent RPG. All of that said, if we're going to go with Oblivion and a highlight of Oblivion, I just mentioned Kvatch. I really, really think that initial moment where you get up there, you see the Oblivion Gate, there's the refugees on the hill while it's pouring with rain, you go inside, there's the whole assault, finding Brother Martin, all of that. It's fantastic. So yeah, that's probably the highlight of the game for me. Also, it's hard to answer for Oblivion too because, frankly, most of the main story there is kind of underwhelming, shall we say, a bit lame. Like, think about towards the end of that game where you're defending against the Great Gate and it's supposed to be all the soldiers from the various cities are at your side, and what's actually happened is there's like 5 NPCs with you and that's it. You know, some of it's not that good, but I really think that initial moment at Kvatch is brilliant, and I fantasize all the time about giving you guys videos on that specific moment. I can't wait to share it and show it off and see how well we can do it. Put our own spin on it so we're not like every other YouTube video out there. It should be good. So Tassalian here has a long comment about some very cool elements of Guild Wars lore and has kind of put them together in an elegant way. I actually seem to remember saying this exact thing. I mean, I'm not trying to say that you've taken this from me or whatever. I'm saying how much I agree with you on this. I'm sure I've said the same thing. But let's read it out. He says, hey WP, I wanted to hear your thoughts on a theory I had about Icebreed Saga and Canton. I finally run through Guild Wars 1 in the last 6 months or so. I've been listening to your old playlist in the background, one campaign behind my progress. In Canton, we meet Dredge, who seem to have come from the Shiver Peaks. In Eye of the North, in the Shiver Peaks, we find a bottomless pit that a Norn jumped into to discover the other side of the world. I believe this would be just north of the Guild Wars 2 Bjorn Marches map, currently unexplored. Given that, I think we don't know where Canton is in relation to the rest of the world. Could this hole actually be a link from the northern Shiver Peaks to Canton? Do we know the rough size of the world, like on the Globe of Whispers? Is it possible that Canton is so far from Tyria that it's actually on the other side of the world, and these tunnels run right through the center of the planet? That could explain how the Dredge, excellent diggers, arrived in Canton. Now that we find ourselves in the northern Shiver Peaks in Guild Wars 2, and we will go to Canton by the end of the saga, wouldn't that give us a great reason to actually go into the tunnel ourselves? It would be a perfect opportunity to see the depths of Tyria and even interact with Primordius again Season 2, which could tie everything together for the Elder Dragons. Too crazy, too perfect, too likely, or just end up with an airship cutscene random as surrogate. I like the way you end that because I very much feel, yeah, we'll probably get... I don't think we'll get just an surrogate. With Path of Fire, I do credit them for doing a cutscene, you know? And there was the prologue kind of opening stuff in Lion's Arch. They weren't lazy with Path of Fire, you know? The only other choice they really had was to have us fully walk there by doing the gate near Ebonhawk and all that, which obviously never ended up happening. It was a cool cutscene, and you start off on an airship that's moving while pyramids are getting destroyed around you. It's a good opening to an expansion. If End of Dragons has a similar quality opening, I'm all for it, even if it's just a cutscene, so to speak, right? I'm fine with that. However, I would also like this tunnel idea. I think in your message, you're a bit too preoccupied with the logistics of how the world is structured. Yes, we do know exactly where Canton is in relation to all the other land masses. Yes, you can see that on the globe, the Order of Whispers globe. And yeah, it might not be true that Canton is on the exact opposite side of the planet to where that hole is. But that doesn't really matter. You don't have to go through the very center of Tyria to have a cool, you know, like minecart, mineshaft thing that the dredge buried and now we're traveling through it on a vehicle of some kind at high speed. You don't have to go through the very heart to interact with Primordus there. You know, the tunnel doesn't have to be a perfect slice. Just do it anyway. All that said, as much as I want to see the tunnel thing where we go there, like following the dredge's footsteps, I don't think I want it tied to the bottomless pit specifically. I mean, sure, give us the hole somewhere in one of the Shiver Peak regions. Probably more the southern Shiver Peaks because there weren't really any dredge up in the northern areas, so that doesn't kind of work in a way. Maybe take us back into the Delgamore front. We can deal with a bit of Primordus stuff, a bit more with the dwarves, and, you know, we've seen the Stone Summit recently and so on. Dredge were there. Dredge may still have that tunnel. Turns out the Dredge can still get to Canton, and we go through that tunnel there. The reason I kind of want to leave the bottomless pit alone is not because of the logistics of going through the center of the earth, but I kind of just want to keep that as a mystery. The past me will hate myself for saying this, because when I was like a big Lost fan, I hated this idea, but I do now believe some things are best left as a mystery. That hole is only cool because it's a bottomless pit that we have no idea where it goes. Is the payoff of now realizing, oh, it goes to Canton, worth losing the intrigue that has brought to the setting? I don't think so. I like the idea of standing on the edge and just no one actually knows where it goes because it's just so deep. And no project, no Asura intellect, nothing can figure out what's down there. It's just so bafflingly crazy of a prospect to go down. And a Norn was cool enough to jump in. I don't want to tamper with that. Nervacat says, in Living World Season 4, Kralkatorrik messed up the mist. Do you think the story in the third expansion will deal with the mist again? The human gods, Wayno-Su, the envoys, the spirits of the Canton, ancient heroes all relate to the mists. How much of these elements do you think will be incorporated into the third expansion? I have no idea, because I mentioned this in a recent video as well. I think that that's all rich subject material that the devs could go for, but I also think that the mists are too complicated and messy and ungrounded. Like, what are we on a quest for ultimately here? To save Tyria? Cool, so let's not obfuscate that too much by dealing with the mists so much. I think we got a nice feel of mist-centric stuff in Season 4, and I wouldn't be surprised if the writers felt they'd eaten their fill of that for now. Maybe they can give us a full, complete story here that doesn't mess with the mists too much. There's also the thing, though, if this is the end of Dragons, really, if this expansion is going to be a big moment in that it finally moves Guild Wars 2 away from Elder Dragon stories, which is kind of what they've suggested. If it's that, maybe they're obligated even deeper now to talk about the mists a bit. The other thing on the table too, if you missed my previous video, is Lissa. You know, that trailer almost screams Lissa in terms of its color and so on. And there was that cool direct hint about Lissa with the Balthazar fight, which could be, you know, breadcrumbing an upcoming story. Someone mentioned a comment as well, the idea that this expansion is about twin dragons almost, two dragons, and what do we have? Lissa, the twin goddess, and what element did Lissa end up taking? The element of water, and this is going to be a watery themed expansion. There's a lot of reasons to think Lissa might have something, and you can't talk about the gods without talking about the mists. So, yeah, but as for the envoys and more details about the difference between Wayno-Su and Ascension and the Celestials, you didn't even really talk about the Celestials in your comment, but all these elements of Canton, I don't know how they're going to work it all in. It's a lot to chew on. Maybe they have to, you know, package it out with some living world post the expansion itself. That's a weird thought, guys. We're talking in a video right now about the equivalent of Season 6. Weird stuff. So this here from Peter is a rather long comment. You guys can pause the video if you like, but it's kind of a suggestion for a format of video I'm not really sure I'm interested in. But at the end, they do have a question. All right, any chance you may do another audiobook in future? My answer is and you say ideally Guild Wars 2. My answer to this is the same as last time, in that I would really like to, and I feel like there's a lot of meaning in producing audiobook content, and I would even like to do stuff outside, but the reality is not many people have watched Ghost of Ascalon yet. Maybe in like another half a year, maybe around Christmas, which will be about a year since I did this audiobook, I'll look at what the viewership on that playlist is like. If it's built up to an even like little bit of a reasonable degree, maybe I can justify it to myself. And what you would see at that point is Edge of Destiny. And then maybe we would see if that did anything, picked up a bit of steam, and we could even go for Sea of Sorrows. I'd stick with the Guild Wars books for now. And then, yeah, I'd totally transition out. It would be a good excuse for me to read more too, which I don't think I do enough of. If I could have it my way, I would magic loads of views onto those videos and say, all right, cool, I'll do more audiobooks, and I could properly justify it. But it takes a lot of time, and that's away from other productions. This isn't really just about money. I think a lot of the time people think, oh, he's just not getting enough money from it. The point is that if I spend a ton of time doing an audiobook series that only like a few hundred people are going to click, all of that could have been videos where thousands were clicking it. And now there's basically thousands of people who are starting to forget about me and starting to forget about the channel and who I am and what I do and stop caring about any of that stuff. So I lose so much. It's not just, oh, I want more money. It's you know, I'm on the edge here and I've got to make sure I do the right project. So it would be fun and I liked it. I think, as I mentioned before, if I did another audiobook, I'd probably ease off on the voices a little bit, since that was my big insecurity the last time. But we'll have to see how it is in another 6 months or so. Sorry as well, I'm pretty sure I've answered this question on another Super Q&A this year. But look, people over on Patreon deserve their answers, so hopefully that's not too tedious to listen to again. David here is reminding me of something I haven't put enough thought into recently. Have I ever considered doing open world builds for the other elite specs? The first set was really fun and unique builds. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm glad you felt that they were unique builds, because my main worry as I was doing those was that they weren't unique enough, that I was basically just regurgitating information that people already knew. But that series really took off, and that is definitely a well worthwhile one doing. You ask if I've ever considered doing more of them? Well, yeah, I have. In fact, when I was producing it, I was pretty confident that I wanted to do another batch, which was the alternate elite spec. You know, most of them are an elite spec. I don't think any core builds appeared on that playlist. So it'd be, okay, if you saw that I picked Chrono, but you really want to play Mirage, here's a Mirage variant instead. I was thinking of that, and I was thinking of a version where it was like condition damage versions. So where I did a Condi version before, I do a flat damage one now. Or when I did a flat damage one before, I do a Condi one now. I haven't thought about it much, and the series is a little bit of a pain now, because certain balance patches have started to tweak the builds, and in really insignificant ways, but they cause people to kind of freak out. Like, I had a tweet from a guy talking about, oh my god, I don't think the Chrono build works anymore. Can you confirm this to me, please? This, that, and the other thing. And really all had happened was that one of the traits had changed the cooldown on some of the Phantasm summoning. The build was 99% still there, but it just takes a tiny little bit of in-game balance to rock the boat. And I know that there are people who thrive on that, because that means they can just do the same series again, except with a very minor alteration, and now it's up to date again. But I'm not sure I really want to get in on all of that. And if I did alternate versions, the alternate version would be more up to date, even though it is still subpar to the slightly mismatched previous version. And I don't know, I'm obsessing over stuff that doesn't matter. You'll probably see I do more of these before too long, because frankly, a lot of people watch them, and that's excellent. Jake Kramer says, hey WP, I love Guild Wars 2 and I'm now a fan of the first, in no small part due to you. My question is, do you have any tips to help me get my friends into the universe? I know it's good, they know it's good, but the intro to the game is almost completely different from the current content in terms of quality. I made the mistake of thrusting one friend directly into Heart of Thorns, this was before Path of Fire, and he got wrecked by the mobs instantly. Pretty sure he uninstalled that day. I wish I had an answer for you here, because I think what you're actually asking about is Guild Wars 2's biggest problem. And this news with it coming to Steam is just resurfaced all these feelings that I've had about this. I, for years now, have not known how to answer this. The main problem is you want people to play Guild Wars 2 from the start because this is one long story. They're not like completely separate chapters that you can take and leave as you like. It's one long story. You kind of want to get invested in the whole story. But to go back to the start involves like a lot of sloggy stuff, a lot of low quality personal story stuff, the ugly jump between the personal story through to season 2. And then just a ton more time playing through a bunch of content where most of the population has shifted away from. So there's just all this ugliness. Hopefully, if someone managed to push through all of that, they'd come out the other side with a deep, passion for the whole game and they'd be about for good. That's what I like to think. The alternative is to tell people to just skip all that stuff because you know that most people are going to get burned out by it and you know that it's not good enough. And tell them to skip, but then you run into these problems, with like the difficulty curve and with jumping into an already established story that you have no real great connection with. Yeah, the game will look prettier. You don't have to have really deep ties and roots to Guild Wars 2 to enjoy the pyramids exploding at the start of PoF, for example. So you will have a slightly higher quality experience, but will it be a hollow one now? And I think it will be. So I don't know if there's an answer because I think that Guild Wars 2 is a fundamentally broken game when it comes to this question. And I think the biggest reason why Guild Wars 2 doesn't grow as much as it should, despite the fact that it's clearly such a well-polished, amazing game, is because of this thing right here. I don't have an answer. Hell, if I thought there was an answer, you would have seen a video from me about it at some point to try and just send this out, just make sure that as many people know it as possible. And right now would be a great time to find an answer because obviously End of Dragons is coming. Do we advise people to just jump straight on in the expansion? I get the feeling that the studio wants us to do that. But will those players stick around? Is it enough to just give them a free level 80 booster and hope they'll be content? Well, it was for some PoF people. I definitely do find comments on Reddit and stuff on occasion where someone says, oh, I joined with PoF, so I'm excited to see an expansion. Some of them stuck around. But on the whole, has this community been growing or shrinking the past 8 years? Justin has a question about something I frequently come up against. Canton elite specs or multi-classing second profession. What do you think of the idea? And the ArenaNet could forego new elite specs in favor of letting us pick a line from another class. So you've almost awakened the beast and enraged me, but you've actually tamed me very quickly with your precise suggestion. So yes, I think that this next expansion should do elite specs. I'd like just a little bit more variety. I feel like you could maybe get 2 more elite specs, waves of elite specs out in the game before you really start having to say, all right, no to the specialization system and look elsewhere and change things up. It would be nice to have like 2 more. And I fully appreciate how actually insane me saying that is. Elite specs take so much work and encompass so many things. And even though they're like kind of separate from the rest of the class in a lot of ways, and elite specs don't directly interact with other elite specs, the more that the devs add, the harder it gets. But I do think there's space for probably 2 more waves, End of Dragons and maybe something after that. Then, yeah, maybe we can do a bit of a format shift. The thing for me is I remember when Lion's Arch got rebuilt just before Heart of Thorns, all the kind of stuff they went through to move us from the point-based system to the specialization system, all in preparation for these elite specs, and this was how the game was going to be handled going forwards. So I want to see them really squeeze that system and get value out of that system before they feel they have to reinvent the wheel and change things again. Keep giving us elite specs, keep giving us masteries, it's working well enough, and I think they should go for it. However, then once we're past that point, what about multiple professions? I've always really kind of hated this idea. I think people shallowly comment that that should be done just because it was there in Guild Wars 1. And I think, really, if you take any time to actually look at the skill and perk system in the game, there's no way in hell multiple professions could come back. Not in the sense that you're dreaming of from Guild Wars 1. In fact, most of this game's combat and design was built around avoiding multiple professions and allowing professions to have unique, distinct identities. It is a crazy Pandora's box to even consider opening. All of that said, a very refined, minimal interpretation of multiple professions in which a character class can borrow one non-elite line from another profession Well, maybe there's space for that. Maybe that can work. I think it would have to be like a slow rollout where the devs are very careful about what lines start getting cross-pollinated, and they can fix any kind of unforeseen synergies and combos as they come in. If they were just to dump all of them out there all at once, you're going to get some really absurd stuff happening. Because even non-elite specialization lines have quite profound mechanic-changing Grandmasters these days, and not even just Grandmasters. So you'd have to watch, you'd have to put a lid on it, and maybe that's possible. And I'm actually a fan of that version of the idea, so I'm glad you mentioned it. I also think there is some realistic space to borrow utility skills as well. So maybe if they kind of went for that approach as well, at the end of the day, it will really look like multi-classing. Eric's kind of has way too big of a question. Hey WP, what do you think the big selling points of the new expansion will be? And what are your probability that each will happen? We've been talking about the Tengu since release back in 2012, and I feel like if we don't get them with Canton, we never will. I also think we'll get the second gen underwater legendaries, a dedicated underwater mount, and of course new elite specializations. Also, do you think you'll do another big contest like you did for Path of Fire to get people to buy End of Dragons? Alright, so first of all, I'm very optimistic about the Tengu. I don't know about everyone else, and I'm scared to be so optimistic. I've been optimistic about silly things in the past, like World 3 of the Super Adventure Box for many years. I know it's now actually confirmed, so maybe one day I'll be vindicated, but, you know, I've been too excited too early. And so I'm not sure how everyone else feels about the Tengu, but I'm quite optimistic. And also, in the recent video production I did about the skimmer and how it can now swim, I asked you guys, hey, do you think that this is so that they don't have to do mounts in the next expansion, since we've kind of got everything already? And while some people made some interesting cases for mounts continuing, like someone mentioned a high-speed underwater mount, but less maneuverable, and I think there is space for that. While people made some cases, a lot of you were actually really receptive to the idea of End of Dragons having no mount. And that actually meant a lot for me to see, because I have to assume that we are a reasonable slice of the Guild Wars 2 general consumers, and in that way maybe the devs don't have to do mounts, because people are actually a little bit more willing to accept no mounts in exchange for something else. And what would be an equivalent exchange? I think the Tengu would be an equivalent exchange, or not necessarily just the Tengu. I think the Lagos too, or whatever, you know, whatever floats your boat. I think that there's most precedent and cool for the Tengu though. I think you're right to identify 3 new underwater legendaries. That would be a really cool idea and a way to keep that going with the game. I also like the idea of underwater weapons being baked into the elite specs, like spear wielders for End of Dragons would be really good, and trident wielders above the water for End of Dragons would tie together with the idea of giving those new legendaries as well in particular very well. The one thing I'm not really too sure about with the expansion is everyone's obsessed with underwater. I think nearly everyone in the community is talking way too much about underwater. I think this will be a majority terrestrial combat experience. It might be themed with a lot of underwatery stuff, but I think that, and it might feel like water a lot, you know, but I don't think there's actually going to be that much underwater gameplay. There'll be some, maybe even more than most expansions and large content drops we've had, but not so much that it's going to be like the definitive experience. I think that's just crazy to expect. Also, finally, will I do a big contest? I don't really have any plans to right now, mostly because when I did that previous contest, I had Welk with me, who helped to make the website and did all that incredible stuff. Welk is not around to help me with that, and so I can't do it unless I spend a lot of time learning the whole new skill set to do more interesting things with the website. Probably a good skill to have that I could go for, but I'd rather spend time making videos. That's kind of my job first and foremost. To be clear, I love the stuff we did for Heart of Thorns and the POF competition. If I could wave a magic wand and have it there, I absolutely would. But I also got a little bit of kickback. People didn't like that I put my affiliate link on there. To me, that was just, oh my god, I need to earn a living somehow. I've put on this cool thing, so can I put my own affiliate link on my own website? But I kind of got some hate for that, and I understand why, so I'm just sort of shy to do it now. There's also the matter of actually giving the prizes out, and I know some people get really hit hard when they don't win. I think a lot of companies, when they do big competitions like I did, they have the judges be kind of anonymous so that there's nowhere to be specifically upset at. But I think when I didn't choose certain winners, people took it really hard and really personally. I remember as well the Sea of Sorrows competition we did for the sea shanty. Someone did a really good submission where they were singing and they should have been very proud of it. It was genuinely a really enjoyable submission. But it didn't win. And the second that it didn't win, they like hid it from the internet and kind of ran away really quickly, like they'd lost all their confidence. And I feel bad about that. I feel bad about being the bringer of bad news to a certain degree, and that would just be happening again. So I might try to save myself the stress. There's also the fact that as amazing as End of Dragons is, and I'm very excited, I'm also at a time in my life where like I said back in the February video, I really need to be something more. I need to expand. I need to be able to do something sustainable. And that might mean less time for a competition on this one. EJB says, hey WP, I'd love to get your opinion on a Guild Wars 1 mobile port. I've recently gotten back into the game and I can't shake the feeling that it would work really great for mobile. You can easily move everywhere and interact with everything just by clicking on stuff. The fighting is clean and UI based. The skill system is massive but boils down to 8 clickable buttons and 8 health bars. It's like it was made for mobile. No jumps, no dodge rolls, etc. Just straight up click the floor action. It would be a game of such superior quality compared to all that crap that makes billions on mobile. I can't imagine that there isn't a market for that. In fact, I think it's so obvious that I'm wondering why it isn't already a thing. Maybe because of the insane reconnect system that would have to be addressed. Am I missing something obvious? I realize I know nothing about porting an old game to a mobile device, but it's been done before. Look at KOTOR, for example, and that worked great as well. Well, I think you've actually talked yourself into, yes, the main reason they're not doing it. A lot of mobile games have to be built in such a way that people can lose connection regularly. And Guild Wars isn't that kind of game at all, so I think there's something a little bit more fundamental they'd have to work with. Everything you said about the gameplay and stuff, though, is absolutely true. And in fact, not only is it just an 8 skill bar, sometimes you'll put a skill on there that you don't even click regularly, like a resurrection signet or something. Really, you're only interacting with even fewer elements of the UI. I think it could work really well on mobile. The devs have talked openly about this in several places. I know that some devs as fan projects found ways to emulate it on their iPads and whatnot. I don't know whether the studio's ever kicked up a serious initiative to make Guild Wars 1 on mobile. I would love to see it, and that would make me a mobile gamer for sure. If a re-released Guild Wars 1 came out with slight content tweaks, differences here and there, but it was available on mobile, that would be so good. It would be so good. I would be well up for that. You'd see a ton of videos. That's probably more exciting to me at the moment than even End of Dragons. That's how much I like the idea. And I think you've correctly identified all the ways in which that format of game can work on mobile very well. Ron Wheeler says, hi WP, welcome back. I speak for all of us when I say it's great to see you. I was wondering if you ever plan on doing PvP again. When you were really into it, that was some of my favorite content to watch from you. Thanks, and I hope you're doing well. I really appreciate that. I get so many nice comments about the Game of the Day series and the Coach series. Probably one of my biggest regrets from last year is not posting those on the main channel and having more confidence in them, because I think they are great. I actually still have, believe it or not, on my desktop, a ton of YouTube links from people who wanted coaching, and I just never produced those episodes in the end. The coaching series, I can 100% say I'm not going to be doing anymore, just because most of the advice that I was offering was the same advice every time. And it's not because I was out of inspiration or because it was bad advice. It's because people were lazy, really, and they just wanted specific advice for them. Even though there were like 15 videos already out that said that exhibited the exact same problems and could be resolved just by watching those and listening to the same advice. So it kind of felt like a bit of a broken record series. I had a very, very definitive moment while producing the Coach series where I realized, hold on, I'm saying the same thing over and over again, and it needs to be said every time, but I mean, come on, just watch the earlier episodes. So that's probably gone. And in general, I would say PvP stuff's gone. First and foremost, I don't think PvP in Guild Wars 2 is worth looking at. I don't really agree with some of the balance decisions. I don't agree with where they're looking for balance feedback. And, you know, I've got my 10,000 wins. I've hit the Legendary Division a couple of times. I've finished the season in around top 50 on the leaderboard. I feel like I've done most of the stuff that I want to do there. And without a proper scene and, you know, peers that I respect en masse, I just can't see myself dedicating more time to it. The only thing that I wanted to dedicate more time to was team-based stuff and actually participating in tournaments. But that's what I did towards the end of the last year, and we just kind of weren't improving. And it was such a time sink. Not only that, but I feel like I was kind of an asshole sometimes. In those competitive environments where you're relying on other people to get better, you know, tensions can get short. I remember one time being a little bit too snappy to someone I was playing with, and they sounded a little bit scared to respond to me. At which point I realized, no, this is not fun enough to justify it at the moment. And I don't want to be this way. That's the other thing. It's a big time sink. If I get addicted to PvP in this game, it does affect my productivity in a big way. So I'm avoiding it. It's just not worth it, I'm afraid. I mean, fair play to people who still play PvP, but that's really how I feel about it at this point. Frederick says, since I started working from home due to COVID, I've pretty much stopped cooking and settled into cheap and fast meal routine with oatmeal porridge for breakfast, a banana and milk for smoothie for lunch, and hard rye bread for supper. You've been working from home for a long time. Do you have a meal routine? That's an interesting routine that you're in there. I have something of a routine. I try not to eat the same thing very regularly. I mean, sometimes I'll definitely get obsessed with the food stuff, and that's like all I want to eat, like getting a thing for meatball dishes, or more recently I got obsessed with what we call in the UK bubble and squeak, which is essentially lots of veg mashed together, boiled down, mashed together, and then fried until it gets crispy, and it's delicious. And I was eating loads of that this year. But in general, I never have breakfast. That was true before the quarantine. I mean, quarantine really hasn't affected my habits at all because, you know, I was working from home before. I'll be working from home afterwards. But yeah, I never really have breakfast. I nearly always have something soupy or stewy for lunch. And then dinner is somewhat variant. But yeah, that's the closest I can get to a meal routine for you. Fascinating, I know. Harris says, hey WP, which games in your opinion have the best character progression customization, as in tweaking how the character works, not how they look? If you were given free reign over designing your dream RPG, how would character progression look like? For some examples, set classes versus blank slates. This is such a broad question. It really depends what style of RPG you're in, like how linear it is, how much off the beaten path you can go, how the combat actually plays out, how fast it is. In general, though, I would say I'm kind of conservative. I think a lot of people, when they think RPG and progression, they think you need like these really wide skill pools and massive numbers of things to branch out into. I kind of believe in having a very limited skill set, but there's lots of ways to tier it up. And in fact, that's one thing I quite respect about New World. They have that very limited base, which helps to preserve, you know, identity and clarity of what does what and why. I think especially in MMOs, I mean, you say dream RPG, but in many respects, I think my dream RPG is an MMO. But for MMOs that are gonna be so expansive, you really got to have a tight grip on that. Which is why I genuinely think Guild Wars 1 was better for the less... loads of options, but you can only pack a few in. As opposed to Guild Wars 2, which has less options, but more are available at once. I think that's a problem. And like, if you look at Guild Wars 2's trait system, I think the fundamentals of specializations and how all that works is really good. Not the acquisition progress and the training. I think that could be more interesting. But I think the fundamentals are really good, but there's too much there. I think having 18 traits active at all times is nuts, especially when each trait can have multiple effects. I think the special... And no one will believe me with this, and you could not change Guild Wars 2 into this now, so please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. But I really think that the best version of that specialization system is one where we don't have 3 specializations on at once. I think you have like 1 specialization on at once. You still have a wide pool of different specializations you can slot in, but you're only slotting once. That would allow Grandmasters to be so much more prominent. Everything has to be kind of diluted down to a certain level to accommodate for 18 brothers and sisters in Guild Wars 2, which kind of loses a lot of something. I think it would be better if they weren't so dilute, if it was like just a few active at once. Hopefully that answers the question in some part, but I mean, that's a huge discussion. And finally, just over an hour in, we have one final question from Rutger Shooten, who says, since the JC is supposed to be liquid again, right? And there are some really deep patches in it, like the Deep. Do you think we're going to have more underwater exploration in Canton? Maybe really refresh the underwater combat and underwater weapons. Well, obviously that talking point has come in several times in this video. I think what you're asking is the same thing a lot of people are asking. My answer is the same as I mentioned earlier, or alluded to earlier. I don't think there's going to be that much. I do think they will play with underwater. I don't know whether we'll see too much balance. Like, you guys have got to remember, last year, there was a big underwater balance patch, which was well applauded. And yet people seem to have, A, forgotten that existed, B, you know, inhaled the fact that existed and improved their opinions about the current state of underwater content, and C, not considered the fact that sometimes ArenaNet just put patches out because they want to improve that part of the game. It doesn't have to be a part of something bigger. So just as much as that release a year ago was allowed to sit on its own, End of Dragons might come out and just be allowed to sit on its own without all these massive, grandiose plans about underwater content. I think it'll be primarily land stuff. It will just feel kind of watery themed as an experience. The big question, the real question I think we should all be asking is, will they have an underwater final boss battle against the deep sea dragon? Will they stage a dragon fight underwater? Now, that only has to be one moment, but it could be the final moment, and that could be really interesting to see how they do it, whether they go for it. Maybe a bit premature, considering we've still got Jawmag between then and now, but something really to be thinking about. So thanks very much for watching, guys. This Super Q&A has been fantastic. I've really enjoyed myself. It's been good to reconnect with you all. Again, one of the reasons I do these videos is to hopefully remind people that I am over there on that website. It is extremely important that I have people supporting me there. Many of you are still, even after the horrible few weeks that I've had here. But anyone who may be left in the meantime, of which there have been a great many, or anyone who's never considered supporting at all, please do consider it. You do get perks, early access to videos, nice little tag for Discord once the integration actually works. It's the top link in the description. Just please feel free to go check it out. Hopefully you feel like you get your money's worth. I'm trying to provide a service here more than just basically begging, but that'll be up to you guys. So thank you all. Hopefully I can recover some of the damage that this year has incurred, and we will see how far we can keep going. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.